Ooh, sorry about that. Welcome to the August Smart Series. My name is Bianca and I'm the manager of events and programs here at the Iowa City Area Business Partnership. So this afternoon we are joined by Sarah Gardner, who is from the Iowa City of Iowa. And then we also have 4 panelists who are here with us or will be here soon. So we have Pat Sawyer, who is the executive director at the Iowa Stormwater Education Partnership. She is not on. Oh no, Brianna is on. We have Brianna Willis, and she's the who is the executive director at Old Brick. And then we have Nick Linsley. He is an architect with Newman Munson. And then we have Jenny Wunderlich, who is the president at Plumbers. No, she changed it. Plumbers Distribution and H2O, Studio H2O. So they'll be talking about water management within their businesses. And just so you guys know, like I said in the beginning, this is a recorded session. We'll have it posted on our YouTube page shortly so that everyone can watch the recording in case you need to leave early, or in case you didn't get in on time. Again, my bad. Before we get started on our presentation, there are just a few people that I'd like to thank. So I'm going to go ahead and start sharing my screen here really quickly. Let's start this. So like I said, here are our 4 panelists, and I just want to start off by thanking our sponsor, who is Mediacom Business, their lead sponsor. Thank you for supporting the program. And then I'm going to go ahead and start sharing a message from them now. Oops.
What's the measure of success for my business? It's the ability to keep serving my customers.
Oh, sorry about that.
What's the measure of success for my business? It's the ability to keep serving my customers. Keep succeeding under any circumstances.
Awesome. And I'm going to stop sharing here. All right. So again, if you'd like to get in touch with Mediacom about their business internet packages, you can reach out to Terry Carpenter. And really quickly, I also want to give another thank you here in a second. I stopped sharing my screen. That was my bad. Whoops. That's Terry Carpenter's information if you guys want to get a hold of him. And then lastly, I do want to thank our other sponsors here. We have the City of Corvo, we have the City of Iowa City, Terry Lockridge, and then of course BRL. So I'm going to stop taking up all of this time because we did start super late. So I'm just going to hand it off. You guys can go ahead.
Great. Well, I'm Sarah Gardner, and Bianca, if you can enable me to share my screen, I can pull up the slides I have. I'm with the City of Iowa City while Bianca's working on that. I'll say I work in the Climate Action and Outreach Division as an engagement specialist. And we're very pleased to be partnering with the Iowa City Area Business Partnership on this EcoSmart series to help get the word out about some initiatives that we have going on to help further our climate action plan. So hopefully you all can see my screen now. As I was mentioning, this fits into our climate action planning activities that have been going on here in Iowa City for several years now. The city began by looking at its own facilities and ways to increase energy efficiency and make use of clean renewable energy sources, among other interventions, as part of our climate planning activity. And they did this not just to make good use of taxpayer dollars, but also to be able to share lessons learned, such as the financial benefits of things like stormwater management. We also, as part of that process, took a look at citywide emission sources and opportunities, and all of these efforts combined into the plan that was approved in April 2020 called Accelerating Iowa City's Climate Action Plans, which outlines our ambitious goal of reducing emissions in the city 45% by 2030 and achieving net zero by 2050. Now that of course sounds very ambitious, and it is. We are an ambitious city, but we also are a practical one, and we know that those goals are achievable just by making 2% reductions year after year. Why have a climate action plan? Well, there are lots of reasons, not just for strictly speaking for reducing emissions, One is to chart the course, but another is to just articulate why we're doing this. And as members of the business community, if you look at the climate action plan, you find very specific language that speaks to this, such as wanting to lead by example, build a strong local economy, create job opportunities, reduce costs, operating costs for residents and businesses, and ensure a high quality of life. All of which is to say, the plan isn't saying simply, we're going to reduce emissions for emissions' sake, but we're doing it with some very clear goals in mind, including attracting and retaining a 21st century workforce and ensuring a good long-term business climate for businesses operating here in Iowa City. Of course, part of that is providing support for business partners who are doing that work. And the city has a number of initiatives and incentives to help do exactly that. Two that I want to call your attention to today is the Climate Action at Work Award Program, which is actually accepting applications right now. This is an annual award that comes with a financial incentive as well as recognition from the city throughout the year. And if you know of a good business, perhaps your own, that is making steps to operate in a more green way, this is an excellent opportunity to get some recognition for that work. So if you're interested, I encourage anyone who is to check out icgov.org/climate awards. We also have stormwater management grants, and these are available year round. So if you actually leave today's presentation thinking, boy, I'd really like to think about putting in permeable paving or some other stormwater intervention for your business, there may be financial help available through the city to help with this. And you can find more information on that at icgov.org/stormwater. Because we're running a little short on time, I'll just mention two others without going into too much detail. The first is the climate action grants. They have an application period that generally opens in March or April. You can find more information about them at icgov.org/climate action grants. And of course, we have TIF funded energy efficiency grants in our urban renewal areas. And we actually are excited to announce that initially we, this last year, had offered those in 3 urban renewal areas. Those urban renewal areas are now expanding to include more. So if you have any questions about that, you can reach out to my colleague, Wendy Ford, who is our coordinator of economic development, and she will be quite happy to talk to you about those resources and others available through the city to help with your plans and initiatives. All right, that being said, I'm going to turn this over to the real stars of the show, the experts in our community who know quite a lot about stormwater management and water efficiency within buildings. We're going to start with Pat Sawyer, the Executive Director of the Iowa Stormwater Education Partnership. I'll let you take it from here, Pat.
Okay, thank you. And I will working on sharing my screen here. Okay, let me see. Never had this problem before. Let's try this. Okay. All right, so as far as stormwater goes, we know from the state climatologist and nationally that as far as precipitation goes, we will and are having more frequent intense rainfall events. So I think we as citizens, community members, businesses, industries, it's time to adapt to make change. And there are plenty of options that are available. Before I get into the practices, I think we need to look at, when it comes to stormwater management, what is it? How does all this work? When Iowa, before settlers arrived, we're a prairie state. The prairies, when it rained out, essentially what happened, the hydrology, as it is called, the water infiltrated through the soil, percolated and recharged groundwater, and that is how our streams were fed. Well, when we've paved over all the surfaces, added buildings, rooftops, streets, etc., water does not soak into those surfaces. So we've changed the hydrology, and in urban areas, it is more runoff driven. So water is running off the street into the storm drain, into the underground storm sewer system, and out to the local stream. So water is getting to our streams faster, and along with it, it is carrying a lot of pollutants. So this used to be what we were dealing with. The deep prairie, deep roots of the prairie, those soils had a lot of organic matter that were able to soak up a lot of water. Now, as we can see, this photo taken in an ultra-urban area, I think this is about an hour after a rainfall event, and you could actually see this in a number of subdivisions, newer subdivisions, where they have not remediated the soils. The soils are so heavily compacted, the water runs underneath the turf, oozes up over the curb onto the street. And shown here is we're seeing typical in suburban areas of Iowa, where at one time it was farmland, and now we have expanded and changed that landscape surface and added all of these impervious surfaces, rooftops, streets, roadways, etc. So the paradigm, the stormwater shift has been in the past, in the 70s and 80s, was collect, convey, get it out to the stream as fast as possible. And then as a result of that, we had a lot of localized flooding. And then it evolved into, okay, let's put in these big basins, detention and retention basins, let's hold it back and then release it more slowly. Now what we're looking at, stormwater management, is a combination of let's address water quality. You know, our impervious surfaces collect fertilizer residue, pet waste, you name it, bacteria, a whole host of pollutants. Let's remove those pollutants. Let's then discharge to a flood management, sort of wet detention, wet retention or dry pond, and release it at a slower rate so we're not eroding out our streams, because this is what we're seeing as a result of stormwater management, not just in the urban areas and the agricultural areas. This is not healthy. This is telling us there's a lot of bounce in the streams, that sometimes when we don't have rain, the streams are at what's called base flow. They're fed by groundwater, so it's cool and clear. But then when it rains out, we're draining all the impervious surfaces, and we have this very unstable situation that impacts habitat. So we got water quality issues that you can see in urban areas, and we have the reality of flooding issues as well. So how can we do things differently? Well, let's try and mimic that historic hydrology that I was talking about. How can we do that? By using green stormwater infrastructure. We can preserve as many green spaces as possible when we have new developments, our woodlands, wetlands, any riparian areas, those areas along stream corridors. And we can try and soak up as much rain as possible, make our soils as functional as we possibly can, because when we develop soils, we heavily compact them. We're stripping off topsoil, we're compacting the soils, we turn the topsoil in a compacted manner. That soil acts like concrete, and so we're gonna get more runoff as a result of that, but we can improve that. We can use vegetation as much as possible. I talked about soil health and reuse. I know more and more, I know we're in water-rich Iowa, for the most part, but in other parts of the country, Arizona and Georgia, they're looking at stormwater reuse, and California very, very closely because they're having such severe water shortages. So the benefits of this green stormwater infrastructure, number one, of course, we're soaking up more stormwater. We can control the release and start protecting our streams. And all of these ecosystem surfaces. So if you've got plants and providing habitat for pollinators and birds, and as far as human health, human mental health, we're softening the landscape with vegetation, and we have these recreational benefits. There are some wetlands, there are some wet ponds, for example, that I would DNR stocks with fish and are used, people can recreate fish in them. What are these practices I'm talking about? The easiest one is to minimize impervious surfaces. You can do that by narrowing streets and etc. You can do soil quality restoration, rain gardens, biocells, tree trenches, and I'm going to go through each one of these. Soil quality restoration we all can do on existing lawns, and this is a demonstration they did right at the Capitol in Des Moines, is we can aerate as deep as possible our lawns, add compost, which is really, really high in organic matter like those prairie soils, and then we can reseed over the top, and we can add more function to our soils so that they can soak up more water. You can do this on your individual lot, business lots, you name it. Also, we have a research project going in the Iowa City area with Southgate Development. We're looking at ways to remediate the soils after construction, and that is a combination of deep tilling or ripping of the soils and maybe incorporating compost, getting the organic matter up. And so we're in the final phases of the research, collecting additional data, and the results will be available on that soon. Installing rain gardens. What a rain garden is, it's just a shallow depression. You excavate out an area. It's the area in your landscape where water will drain. It doesn't pond, it will drain. And so, I mean, what I'm saying is you don't have standing water after 24 hours. So you have to have soils that perk right. And so you can you excavate out an area, you can amend the soils, divert downspouts, or just have the landscape drain to this area and plant it with your favorite horticultural plants or prairie plants or woodland plants. And you'll see during a rainfall event that rain garden will fill up, but then the water drains away in less than a couple hours. You can have a staff team building project by putting a rain garden at your business. Some rain gardens can be used as seen here to capture and collect street runoff as well to treat it. So many different sizes and shapes. Bioretention cells, another practice, they're like a rain garden, except they have an engineered subgrade with a subsurface drain. They have amended soil with a combination mainly of sand, a little bit of compost, a little bit of topsoil, and they have an overflow feature for large events. So water comes into the practice. Here it's sheet flowing off the parking lot through a grass filter strip. And it temporarily ponds, and then it filters through that media, and then is discharged to the storm sewer through that perforated pipe. Through larger events, there's an overflow. So we have these all over the state, many different sizes, shapes, beautiful flowers growing in them. You can plant trees. This happens to be one in Ames during a rainfall event, so you get temporary ponding. Coralville has a whole host of bioretention cells, and they actually use tree filter boxes as well. So here we can see permeable pavers surrounding the outside. Water enters this little mini biocell that has amended soil, temporarily ponds, is filtered, and then connected to the storm sewer system. Bioswales, so you can instead of using just typical grass swale or using underground pipes, you can actually save money in most cases and convey the water on the surface, plant it to prairie vegetation for additional filtering and soaking up of water. So it's like a series of bioretention cells as you move down grade. So it treats the water, but then conveys your larger rainfall events to for example, a flood control practice like a wet pond or a dry pond. An example of an infiltration cell at outside a small business, a consulting firm. So here the soils perk, so stormwater enters the infiltration cell that has rock on the top, and it's filtered into the subsurface soils. They happen, instead of using standard turf, they're using native turf, blue grama and buffalo grass as well, that has deeper roots than typical bluegrass. This is a combination of using permeable pavers, and these are tree filter boxes, again, that are like mini retention cells. And we have another type of system called a tree trench, where you have this plastic framework, you backfill with a permeable media, mainly sand, a little bit of compost and topsoil, and then you can put permeable pavers across the top, as you see here on the surface, planted to trees, and then the tree roots can spread out. So, and different applications of permeable pavers in a parking lot. They come in many different colors these days. So you have these subsurface different aggregate layers. So you can, in some cases, this happens to be City of Ames, they're able to manage flood. They have a deep enough aggregate layer that they can manage flood type events, and then also manage and clean up those smaller rainfall events, 1.25 inches or less. You can pack the different bedding layers and then add the permeable pavers and a chip between the pavers. Not only concrete pavers, but we have clay pavers that are available as well. Closest to another application at Country Landscapes in North Liberty. They installed permeable pavers, Cedar Rapids Indian Creek Nature Center, right during a rainfall event. You don't see any ponding on that surface. Rainwater harvesting is also taking off in the state. This can be anywhere from a little rain barrel to larger cisterns, and actually even a much grander scale. And we do actually have a company in Iowa, Tifton, I believe it is, Xerxes. They make these large fiberglass cisterns that can be used subsurface. One of the largest applications, or two of them that I'm aware of, is at the World Food Prize Hall in downtown Des Moines and at Wellmark in downtown Des Moines. They have subsurface cisterns. They are using that water to flush toilets and urinals. Green roofs as well. You've got a number of those in the Iowa City area, especially on the campus of the University of Iowa. And a lot of sedums are used. So you have the soil media that absorbs the rainfall, and then it's typically planted to more drought-resistant type plants. But here at Central College, they added some prairie vegetation where they were able to plant deeper media. These can be there are different types of green roofs. Some where people can just look at it through a window. This one is on the campus of Iowa State University. But then you have the City of Cedar Rapids, their new public library. You can go on top of the library, sit, read books, drink coffee, and such. So many options. For a flood management side of it, The wetlands can be used. That's a relatively newer practice in the state of Iowa, but we're seeing more and more of those installed. You have shallow and deep pools that go and the water moves through this really serpentine type path. So you have all these different environments for degradation of stormwater and for flood control, as well as our standard wet basins and dry basins. So this happens to be a retention, a wet pond that has native landscaping, prairie vegetation surrounding that practice for an additional filter and to help control the goose population as well, because they don't hang out in prairies. And then with that, my closing comments, I'll leave a quote from Gandhi, just looking at the importance of water, air, clean air, water, and land and soil. So any questions at all? Otherwise, we can hold those questions until the end.
Yeah, I think we should go ahead and wait till the end.
Okay, all right, I'm going to turn off my video and mute myself. So go visit iowastormwater.org for more information.
Great. Next up, we have Brianna Wills, Executive Director of Old Brick.
Okay, hello. Thank you for joining us. I'm going to share my screen here and start my presentation. Okay, so I'm the Executive Director here at Old Brick in downtown Iowa City. We're located right kind of in the middle of the campus. We're not part of the campus. Lots of people confuse that. We're actually one of the oldest buildings in Iowa City. We're 165 years old. We're technically 166, but I'm holding on to that 165 till we can have a big celebration. We're actually a nationally registered historic landmark that happened several years ago in the 70s. And it was originally built as a church, but now serves really as a community center and a nonprofit incubator. So when I came on board to Old Brick about 4 years ago, one of the projects that they had just completed, the board of directors here, was a water mitigation issue on the north wall of our building. There had been foundation leakage. So we knew that on the east side of our building, which is down the Clinton side street, there is a very sharp hill. We kind of sit on top of the hill actually. And that hillside was eroding and there was water entering the basement of our building and really eroding the foundation. So that was kind of the problem that was presented to us or presented to myself when I first came on board here. So through many trials and errors, we actually partnered with a company called Sustainable Landscape Solutions, and their project manager at the time was David Selmer. And he actually came up with this really brilliant solution, a way for us to redirect our water from our roof that had previously been rolling down this hillside right onto the sidewalk because we had been here way before that sidewalk was here. So that, historic buildings get grandfathered in to a lot of things. But when we needed to mitigate this, it wasn't appropriate any longer for us to just roll our water right back onto the sidewalk. Obviously, that causes lots of issues. So we needed to do kind of a longer term solution. Once we talked to the city of Iowa City, their engineers, we realized that the nearest stormwater that we could connect to was actually almost a block away at the Ann Cleary walkway. If you know, we're at the corner, Ann Cleary's kind of halfway down the block. So that was a huge challenge and obviously very expensive. So David Selmer came up with essentially creating a stormwater retention system using permeable pavers. And our previous speaker, Pat, just kind of touched on this as one of the options. You can't tell right here from the left-hand picture how steep that hill is, but it's actually quite steep. And this is the front of our building. The majority of some of the mitigation issues took place on the east side of this building. But what happened across the front of this building is on the right-hand picture, you'll see we dug a very large trench. And these actually became water retention ponds. And through layers of soil and silt and different rocks, we essentially built giant water retention ponds so that we could redirect our wastewater, and our wastewater being the water from our roof, not like flushing toilets kind of water, but truly the water that comes out of the sky onto our property. We redirected all of that right into these water retention ponds. So my next slide will show you a little bit. This is what it looks like after all of that construction, and that happened in 14 days. So as you can see, it's essentially a permeable paver patio. So this was really an unexpected bonus to us, because not only were we able to implement best practices as far as wastewater management and really benefit that climate action and really be forerunners on that, we were actually able in the end to gain an additional space for our building. So the patio is about 2,000 square feet of usable space. And since we do a lot of events here, this is really just a great space, a great addition to our historic building. So we feel very fortunate to have come across a company that was able to help us implement something that was really kind of, I would say, environmentally forward in the sense of, a really dramatic solution to our problem. So I'm going to show you a really quick video, or this is what the patio looks like. The darker spots are because it had rained that day. So the patio looks a little bit different, but those are just wet spots. That's kind of obviously the aerial view. And then the next slide, I'm just going to show you kind of a quick drone video of what it looks like from the footage of a drone. So again, we're just really fortunate to come across some really great solutions to manage our water. When the water soaks through these retention ponds or pools, essentially, underneath our patio, Pat touched on this, but it also filters that water. So it essentially cleans it, and then it just returns that water to the ground, to the groundwater. And so that really keeps this water, our wastewater, from just rolling down the street right into a gutter. So this is some ways that cities can use to keep from having mass flooding events when there is so much impermeable pavement like Pat touched on. So, this type of application, you may also see it like Big Grove, the Iowa City location. They also have a giant patio very similar to this. So thank you very much.
Great, thank you so much. That's really beautiful to look at. Next up, we have Nick Linsley, an architect with Newman Munson Architects.
All right, thanks, Sarah. It says the host disabled attendee screen sharing.
You can try again.
There we go. Yeah, it looks like that worked. Okay. All right, is that full screen for everybody? Perfect. All right, yeah, as Sarah said, I'm Nick Linsley with Newman Munson Architects. Today we're just going to go into depth a little more about the vegetated roofs Pat had mentioned earlier, one of those green infrastructure techniques for both buildings and public spaces. So the title is Vegetated Roofs. That's kind of the technical term. Also, same thing as green roofs. So that's what we'll be going through. So green roofs do have a fairly long history. Traditionally, they've been used all over the world for hundreds of years. This is an example from Scandinavia and the Faroe Islands of green roofs or sod roofs being used on traditional wood structures. And the reason it was used then is a little different from the reason they're used now, aside from the fact that both now and then were used for insulated value for the buildings. Back in the day, they were also used as ballast or weight for the birch bark wood structure that goes on top of the roof that served as the waterproofing for these, and also helped to condense the wood so you didn't have issues with draft in the wintertime. But today, when we think of green roofs, we think of more something like this, a flatter application, not always, but usually in a urban environment on commercial structures that provide both amenity, visual amenity, and then also the other benefits we'll talk through a little bit. So what is a vegetated roof? Here's just a quick diagram with the different components of what goes into it. So typically, I guess before I get started here, one component that's left off of this is the roof structure. You can't have a vegetated roof without holding it up. So that is technically the first component of the system. Next, we need a waterproofing and root containment layer. Typically, waterproofing acts as root containment. Sometimes they're separate. Sometimes it's one and the same. The roof membrane itself is what keeps the water out of the building. Then often there's a drainage system, some sort of perforated mat or woven mat out of different types of materials, either sometimes organic materials, sometimes plastics, that just lets the water travel, any water that gets through the system, travel to the roof drain or drainage system on the roof to get down to a storm drain. Filter fabric is then used to keep some of that organic material from the growing medium from getting through and washed into your storm drains so they don't get clogged up with all that. If it's a very large green roof system and you don't have a way to capture that growing medium if it's getting through, you're going to have drainage issues fairly quickly. The next is the growing medium itself. So on the screen here, it just looks like soil. Typically, soil alone is not used on roofs. If you were to use only soil, you're going to run into compaction issues very quickly, and then that often lends the plants to be less successful. So growing medium is typically made up of a mix of soil, things like perlite, which is a insulated mineral, and then crushed clay and other things. So it's a lighter, airier medium that allows for compaction not to happen and root structure to move freely and not get condensed over time. And then of course the vegetation, as Pat mentioned, some of the examples that she showed in her images showed the wildflowers that have been used in some of the universities around the state. One of the more common things is sedum. Sedum's like a succulent that grows very well in Iowa, especially in our I guess zone 5B where we are. Grows very well and doesn't need a lot of care, so it's fairly it maintains itself fairly well. There are three common types of green roofs. So the first is extensive. Next is semi-intensive, and third is intensive. So extensive is probably the most common you see around here. This is the lowest cost, usually a thin growing medium, and often in modular trays, as you see in the photo here. It's most common because this is the easiest type of application to install in retrofit projects. So not only do you see it in new builds, it's usually your only option when you're going to do a retrofit project, just because you don't really need to worry as much about the weight of the system like you would with the intensive. The weight is much lower and can typically go on most existing roof structures. It's also very suitable for steep slopes because of the thin soil in the system. You can put it onto a roof that's up to a 25-degree slope. So it gives you a little more option if you already have an existing structure that it's going on. You don't have to rebuild any aspects of your building. And then also because of the types of plants going into these, often those sedums that really need very little water, there's a reduced need for irrigation and drainage. But as mentioned, you kind of limit yourself on choice of plants. So sometimes you see these systems where there's wildflower or grasses growing. That's usually not often included in the actual package when it's installed on the roof. Those are often seeds that were dropped from birds throughout the summer, and those types of taller grasses and things come and go as the seasons go, just because they don't have the ability to establish root structure in that fairly thin growing medium. Semi-intensive. This is kind of halfway between what we talk about is kind of a modular tray and more of a field application where you're basically just putting down the growing medium in large swaths and planting it. This has more of a moderate weight and gives you a little more option for what you can grow in it, just because you have more thickness for that root structure, and the cost goes up as well. Typically, you're going to see this in new builds, but it is suitable for retrofit projects as well. And then the last is the intensive, and that's more the deep soils where you start to see things like shrubs, where it almost feels like park atmosphere on the roof. There's a high insulative value with this just because of the deep soil and the extensive vegetation and varieties of vegetation that can be used. And then typically these are done on new builds just because there's that extra planning needed to make sure the structure can hold up that added weight, and also the highest cost system. So let's talk through the benefits. The first is providing insulation of the building. It is a benefit and definitely worth noting, but not one of the primary ones. Soil, this type of growing medium, really only provides about 2 to 5, or in our value of 2 to 5 per inch of growing medium, whereas a typical rigid insulation might give you on average 5.5 of R value. So if you're using it just for insulation, there's better options out there, but if you want to be sustainable, it does provide that for you. The next is it helps with efficiency of your mechanical equipment. By putting these green roofs on top of your structures, it actually helps to lower the air temperature on the outside of the building, typically where you have your mechanical equipment. So the less work the equipment has to do to create a change in temperature between exterior and interior, especially in summer months, the better for the lifetime of the equipment, the better for the performance of your building and your energy bill. Number 3, reduces greenhouse gas emissions. Like I just mentioned, the less your mechanical equipment has to work, the less energy you're going to be spending. So that alone is going to help you reduce emissions from the different building systems that keep your building warm and cool in the different seasons. Improve stormwater management, similar to what Pat was talking about, and then stormwater issues that Brianna was also talking about. It does help you retain water on the roof, so it's not all directly going into the stormwater system, and so this graph on the table on the right side kind of shows you an idea of how much water is actually retained on a green roof versus a standard roof where you might get some standing water here and there. So it's about 80% of your average rainfall is retained on a green roof versus 24% on a standard roof. And I believe this, when it says standard roof, it's talking more about shingles that do accept some water, and it holds moisture on the roof after a rain. But as you can see, there's a lot more water that you can avoid sending into the stormwater system. Number 5, reduces heat island effect. So heat island effect is what happens in urban areas where radiation from the sun basically gets absorbed by all the solid surfaces, concrete and darker concretes and asphalts. And then that radiation is then thrown back into the area around those solid surfaces, and it actually raises the temperature beyond what the climate actually is at the time. So say it's 71 degrees out, heat island effect may actually make it more like 81 degrees in the city, just because of that extra radiation that's being pushed back into the immediate area. And then number 6, just of course, positive benefit of green roofs is they create amenities and provide just the biophilic effects to the building. Biophilia being the idea that when you introduce natural elements and things into your environment, it helps to increase things like productivity, reduce stress, and just make you all around more content and happy. So always a good thing to include in your projects. So before I finish, just want to show a few applications around town that we've worked on. One that is not our project, but also worth showing. This is the rooftop of One Place at Riverfront Crossings, Midwest One's Operations Center down on South Clinton. This would be one of those examples of extensive systems. So these are trays placed on the roof edge to kind of serve as a skirt for the roof patio, a nice visual buffer between the roof edge and the roof edge, or the patio edge and the roof edge. And this would be an example of that sedum that we were talking about earlier. This is an example of more of a semi-intensive or intensive green roof. This is on the Chauncey's patio on level 5, I believe. Here's the roof patio at the original film scene location off the alley. I think this was right after construction. There should be a guardrail around here, but that was eventually added. But again, the tray system that was great for this project because it was retrofitted going into an existing structure. And then again, using it as sort of that skirt application around the edge of the patio. This is up on the private rooftop of Market House on the north side. So, and that's all I have. Thank you.
Oh, Sarah, you're muted.
Of course I am. I was just saying thanks to Nick, and I felt that I should note that both Newman Munson and Old Brick, our previous 2 presenters, were 2020 Climate Action at Work Award winners. So for this and other work that they're doing. So thank you very much for helping us talk about your good work. Our last presenter is Jenny Wunderlich from PSC Distribution and Studio H2O. I'll turn it over to Jenny.
All right, here we go. Water efficient fixtures, folks, for coming in last year. But I am sort of passionate maybe about telling people that there are efficient fixtures that can be practical and look nice and, you know, suit a purpose here for us and for not just businesses, but also at home. So I'm just going to really touch on some that I hope you'll find interesting and then look into them as well. But this is just one application. If you think about all of the businesses that we have in Iowa City, right, that use either a urinal or like a commercial toilet, right? So this flush valve, you pull up to flush 1.1 gallons and you push down for 1.6. This is not like the beautiful like rooftop things Nick's talking about. This is like the down and dirty, but I tell you what, this saves water. This, you know, has a purpose. And sometimes we don't talk about them, we don't hit them, but I think it's just something interesting to note that it can, you know, really make a difference over time, especially you're trying to not only save money, but also save water. And then here we go. There are cool looking toilets that save water that actually flush well. I don't know if you've had this before, but when my parents changed the toilet when low flow came out, quite a few years ago, I won't tell you when, but when I came back from college, my folks had changed the toilet in my bathroom to a low flow and it did not work, right? It plugged all the time. What had happened was they took what was 3.5 gallons per flush. If you think about that, what was the standard? It was 5 gallons. Now it was 3.5 gallons, 3.5 gallons per flush. Well, what they did was they brought it down to 1.6. but they did not change the flushing technology. So can you imagine flushing 3.5 gallons and then flushing 1.6 with no change in how it's supposed to work? Yeah, issues, right? So they had issues. Maybe you've used a toilet like that. They have come so far. And they're actually on the far right that says the original single or dual flush. This company, Niagara, and they have really come to market with low flow toilets that people have actually been satisfied with at really low flush rates because they have changed what's actually happening inside the tank to give it some extra pressure so that it works well. But there's also other low flow toilets, as you can see There on the left, you've got a really beautiful, what we call skirted toilet, right? It looks almost like it's got a skirt on it, but how many of you want to clean the toilet on the far right? If you see all that sort of loop-de-loop, do you know what I'm talking about? I like all the little intricacies of where that pottery comes together, and more people want practical things. So if you look at the left, it is so much easier to clean the outside of those toilets that are on the left, and they flush a lot less water. So if you have a business here in town, or even your own home, if you have a toilet from 20 years ago flushing 3.5 gallons, if you even went down to 1.6 or 1.28, oh goodness, the amount of water that you will save is extensive. And so I threw a website up there where you can like calculate the water savings. So if people are checking on that, they are welcome. It's just niagaracore.com. It's just a great way to check the water savings from toilets. Now, faucets, this is another one that they can look cool. They do not have to look like an old gas station bathroom to get a new faucet that saves water. So even that one on the far left can come all the way down at a gallon per minute, which is really, really low. However, I try to prep people, that is very, very, very little water, right? So you need to be aware that it's going to take a little bit, maybe to wash a lot of soap off of your hands. But even up to, 1.1 or 1.2 just is a great savings from maybe an old faucet you have, again, flowing 3 gallons per minute. Huge, huge changes we can make just one faucet at a time. And then electronically, I know that I really get frustrated. I don't know about you. If you go to an electronic faucet and it's not working and you're playing the dance of like, okay, where's my hand go? Does it go here? Does it go here? That just sort of irks me. So they have come a long way on those. But one thing I will say is they do save water. So in a business, you don't have to worry about someone leaving, right, that valve open. It's going to shut off and the water's going to stop. The valve is going to close. So there is great, especially for businesses, great savings for switching to electronic faucets so that they will shut off and you don't have to worry about customers accidentally leaving or employees accidentally leaving the faucet running or dripping. But anyway, those are just some looks that are possible in low flow versions, which is pretty sweet. And then they also have there's a website there listed for faucets in terms of water savings, and that your calculation of how much you will save based on the number of people in your home and how often you think you have your faucets on. So I just like tools like that. I think it's really, really helpful to be able to tell people, even if it's your employees or your family, wow, this is what's happening. This is what we can do. This is the difference that we can make. My kids are in 4-H. I'm like, 4-H project right there. Let's calculate what we can save when we change this, or if I can get my daughter to take shorter showers. Okay, so which coming to shower heads, goodness, here are 3 different shower heads, and there are a lot, but these have low flow options. And I'd say the upper left, one of my employees here, she has had this at her house and has been very happy with it. And she would tell me if she wasn't, because we talk a lot about how things work functionally, because we don't want to offer something to a customer and have them be dissatisfied. The far right one also has multiple functions, and it is intended for low pressure situations. So sometimes there are homes, whether you're out on a farm with really low pressure, or you just have low pressure based on where you are in your building, right? For apartment buildings, sometimes the pressure is really low. Like this shower head is a low flow shower head for low pressure surfaces, circumstances, so that you actually can get good pressure and still conserve water. And for me, I have a lot of thick hair. I really don't like standing in the shower forever if the low flow is just like misting me. I'm like, I'm going to stay here forever. I don't have time to stay here forever. So what I want to do is switch back up to a high flow. No, we need them to be practical for us, right? Our usage, it needs to work well. Otherwise, people aren't going to do it. And they're going to say, I don't want to save water, right? If I have to flush my toilet 5 times because at a low flow, it doesn't work as well, that defeats the purpose, right? We really want high function that also is efficient, and they are out there. Sometimes you just have to dig a little deeper or ask some more questions, and it can be really good. So just that one in the middle, gold is a popular color, plus we're in like black and gold country, right? Here we go Hawks. So there's your gold shower head that can be low flow with multiple functions. So that was a super fast overview, I realize, but water savings is possible. And you can go from, look at that old toilet, good golly, all the way to newer, sleek. Either way, we can save water in all of our fixtures in different ways, in practical ways, and hope that you will just even be intrigued enough to check it out, or maybe switch out a shower head or a faucet or something like that to conserve our water around here and just keep making those improvements that help all of us. And maybe you have friends in California or elsewhere that have even lower flow restrictions. You can say, oh man, I saw this. They can look cool. They can function well. Encourage them that it is possible when they're maybe complaining about having to go a little bit lower flow on their fixtures. So thanks for your time.
Thank you so much for that, Jenny. It strikes me, I learn something new every time we have one of these presentations. And as you were giving your presentation, I was thinking about how even having something that's simpler to clean in its own way saves water. So thank you very much. We've run a little late, but we did want to save a little time at the end for questions. We'll go ahead and open the floor. Does anybody have any questions now? All right, hearing none. If you do have any questions after the presentation is over, of course, please do feel free to reach out.
I think we do have a question. Give me 1 second here.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, sorry. This is Erin from the Business Partnership. I just had, Jenny, I would love it if you could share that link. I didn't catch the link for the faucet one. I would like to look at that. My kids, I have 4 kids, and these faucets are running all the time. So I would like to figure that out. But, and then I was just wondering, I think it was Brianna that was talking about that picture that you showed in front of Old Brick with the patio that when it was wet. I was wondering what happens when it's really cold, and it would freeze, I assume. So I was just curious what happens with that water.
Yeah, I mean, obviously we would have, an ice issue, and it is a little bit different maintenance because you aren't going to want to use the same chemicals you would just on a regular sidewalk. So for our instance, because we don't do a lot of outside events, obviously in the middle of the winter, we kind of just shovel a path to our front door, which also isn't used super heavily in the winter. And then we kind of leave it be in the winter. Probably someone like Big Grove probably has a more substantial way they manage their patio, which is a little more, need of use during the middle of the winter. But for our sake, we just, if ice builds up or something like that, we just leave it and let it naturally melt as the temperatures change.
Interesting.
I actually had a question, and this could be for all of you actually. So I think it was Pat who was talking about collecting water when it rains, like those basins, whether they're big or small. So my hometown, which is 15 or 20 minutes away from here, it's in West Liberty, they caught on to the fact that people in their homes were collecting rainwater. And I don't know if it has started yet or it's going to be starting here soon, but the city of West Liberty has decided to move forward to charging the residents anytime it rains. Because I'm not even exactly sure. They say it takes away from, the billing because they're saving so much water that they can use it from the rain, etc. So I just want to know what your guys' thoughts were on that.
I can tell you what that is. What it is, it's called a stormwater utility fee. We know that we have a wastewater fee, we have a drinking water fee. In some communities, they may have sanitary waste as well, or that's done privately. So more and more cities have started, have implemented a stormwater utility fee. And it's mainly because it has more to do with they've got the infrastructure in the community, like the storm sewers, and they've the infrastructure is aging, and stormwater has been always put on the bottom plate, low priority. And so with aging infrastructure and undersized storm sewers, communities are realizing we need our own separate fee and utility to pay for the upkeep. And if they're adding any practices, additional practices for flood control and such, they need a mechanism to pay for that. And most of the time, sometimes it's covered under wastewater, sometimes under the general fund, but it's more and more across the United States, more and more cities have stormwater utility fees. And that's exactly what that is. So, yeah.
Got it. Okay. Yeah, I had no idea. And I don't think they did such a good job explaining because everyone seems a little upset by it. But now getting it explained, it makes a lot more sense.
Yeah, usually there's an educational process that is associated with that, where the community may hire a consultant or do it themselves and have public meetings to explain what that is, what they're looking at rates and what the money will be used for and such. But so many communities that don't have stormwater utility fees have very old infrastructure, undersized infrastructure, and it's their only mechanism to deal with it. So, yeah.
Thank you. I did have one last question, and this is, I think it's gonna be more for Brianna because Old Brick did it. But when you added those, when Old Brick got those pavers added, was it mostly for aesthetic looks? Did it did it lower bills in any way? Because I know like what Nick talked about with the vegetated roofs, they do save some money. So do the permeable pavers also do too, or it's more for, aesthetic or?
Well, it was really to manage our wastewater. The water had to go somewhere. And that's to keep it out of our foundation or keep it from damaging our foundation further. So we really redirected the water and captured it. So there isn't a cost savings to us directly as far as lowering of a utility bill, but we do consider it, a environmentally sound practice that is considered kind of a best practice as far as water management. So we think of it as more of a savings to the environment and, more of a service as a good citizen. So we don't really see any direct benefit other than, actually kind of the other side of that is the direct benefit we see is we can rent out that space. So actually it's a money maker for us if you think about it like that. But as far as a utility savings, we don't really see anything related to that.
I'll build upon that comment, and oftentimes in areas where you're challenged for space, a practice like permeable pavers is awesome because more and more cities are updating their stormwater ordinances to require that some sort of stormwater management be used. And so if you have permeable pavers, you don't have place for a big detention or retention basin, you can go underground with that. So and you could calculate the cost savings associated with that. So yeah, there is a financial benefit as well as those ecosystem services. You're protecting the local streams as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think what Pat's saying is there's certainly a cost savings to the city as far as city, county, but to our organization, like as far as our actual utility bills, month to month, we don't see it. But obviously long term over the cost of what the cities have to pay and then charge us back as customers, long term you would see, a benefit, but not, month to month on a utility bill.
Yeah, I think there's only one community I know of, and it might be Cedar Rapids, that might give a discount if an entity does install certain practices. But there are some other communities in the United States as well.
I'll just hop in and say the city of Iowa City does not offer a discount for permeable paving at this time, but we do certainly offer funding opportunities for businesses that want to pursue that. So a bit more of a carrot than a stick right now.
Right, the city of Iowa City has a nice program for cost share programs, not only those practices that I had mentioned, excluding the permeable pavers. I'm not sure about the green roofs as well, but they also cost share on stream bank restoration and stabilization too.
And I should jump in and mention that actually Old Brick did receive funding through the city of Iowa City and actually through Johnson County through what's called REAP funds that did help us manage the cost of installing that patio.
Awesome. All right. Well, I don't think we have any other questions at the moment. Sarah, did you want to close it out at all, or do you want me to keep going?
I think we're good. Just thank you everyone for your time and these wonderful presentations. Yeah,
let me just share my screen for the last few seconds here. I'm just pulling up my slide deck. So again, thank you to the City of Iowa City and all of the great panelists that we had today. I sure learned a lot. Before we end, I just want to mention that our next session is going to be Get a Grip on Your Business, and it is going to be by Rob Taylor and Michelle Owens, and that is September 14th. So it should be really exciting. As we mentioned before, this event is part of a series. We cover a new topic on the second Tuesday of every month. So they will be helping you guys explore how to get a grip on your business with actual takeaways created to help you to restore traction in your businesses. The US system, which is what they're going to be talking about as well, is the entrepreneurial operating system, and it helps strengthen 6 key components of your business. And then lastly, before we end, I just want to do one final thank you to our sponsors. One more time, thank you to MediaCom Business, BRL HR Consulting, the cities of Coralville and Iowa City, and Terry Lockridge and Dunn for their support of this educational series. Sorry, everyone, one last time for the late start. I do apologize, but we got through everything. Thank you guys for joining us, and we hope you guys join us for the next one. Bye, everyone.
Thank you.